On a dark road in Dover, Massachusetts, in April of 1977, a teenage boy's headlights swept across an old stone wall. For a few seconds, he saw something crouched there. It was small, pale, and thin, with long fingers wrapped around the rocks, and a head far too large for its body. Then it turned. Two glowing eyes stared back from the edge of the light. By the time he looked again, it was gone. At first, it sounded like one strange sighting, but within 26 hours, two more teenagers would report seeing something almost identical on the roads of Dover. Then, the creature vanished completely. No body, no proof, and no explanation. This is the unsettling story of the Dover Demon. Most monster stories are built slowly. They begin as rumors, then grow through retellings, newspaper mentions, local gossip, and secondhand accounts passed from one person to another, until the original event becomes difficult to separate from the legend. A strange sound in the woods becomes a creature. A shadow on the roadside becomes a warning. A frightened witness becomes the first piece of a story that eventually takes on a life of its own. But the Dover Demon did not grow that way. It did not come from some ancient New England legend. It was not tied to a burial ground, an old curse, a haunted house, or a forgotten colonial crime. There were no centuries of folklore surrounding it before people started talking. No local superstition warned children to stay away from certain roads because something might get them. Before April of 1977, the Dover Demon did not exist in the public imagination at all. Then, for a little more than a day, it was there. In the span of roughly 26 hours, 3 teenagers in Dover, Massachusetts claimed to have seen something that none of them could properly explain. Each sighting happened at night, and each happened near a quiet road, each of which involved a small, strange creature with a body that seemed too thin, limbs that seemed too long, and a head that appeared to be far too large for its frame. Dover sits southwest of Boston, and although it's not far from the city, it has always had a quieter and more rural character than people might expect from a town so close to a major urban area. In the 1970s, Dover had stretches of road lined with trees, stone walls, and large properties. There were also dark bends through trees where headlights were often the only thing separating the driver from the night around them. It wasn't a wilderness, but it had places that could feel very empty and liminal after sunset. Those details matter because the Dover Demon was not seen in some distant forest or remote mountain range. It was seen in a familiar town, on roads people use every day, and that makes this story more uncomfortable. A monster in a faraway swamp can keep a distance, but a strange creature on a road near someone's house just hits a little different. It makes ordinary places feel less secure. It suggests that the impossible does not have to live deep in the wilderness, but sometimes, according to stories like this, it only has to wait at the edge of headlights. The first sighting happened on the night of April 21st of 1977. 17-year-old Bill Bartlett was driving along Farm Street in Dover with 2 friends in his car. It was around 10:30 at night, and the evening itself seemed ordinary. There was nothing about the road, or that car ride, or that moment that should have become famous. It was just a group of teenagers passing through town, moving through a familiar place under the cover of darkness. As Bill drove, the headlights of the car swept across the pavement and roadside. In a place like Dover, those headlights would have briefly revealed pieces of the landscape before letting them fall back into darkness. Tree trunks, brush, mailboxes, and old stone walls. Most of the headlights would have been forgotten instantly, but at one point, near a stone wall along Farm Street, Bill saw something that stayed with him for the rest of his life. At first, his mind tried to interpret it as something normal. It's how people usually respond when they see something strange. They don't immediately leap to monsters. They search for a familiar category, an animal by the road, a dog, a cat, or maybe even a raccoon. Maybe some injured creature crouched near the stones. For a second, that may have been enough, but as the car got closer and the headlights touched the thing more clearly, the ordinary explanations began to fail. The creature was small. It didn't have the compact, recognizable shape of a raccoon or a dog. Its body looked thin and oddly proportioned. Its limbs seemed long and spindly. Its head appeared huge compared to the rest of it, almost swollen looking, as if the body beneath it was too underdeveloped to support it properly. The thing seemed to be positioned on or near the stone wall, and one of the most unsettling details Bill later gave was that it appeared to have long fingers wrapped around the rocks. That image has become one of the defining parts of the Dover Demon story. A pale, small-bodied creature crouched against a stone wall, its long fingers gripping the stones as a car approaches in the dark. The detail is disturbing because it gives the creature an almost human quality without making it human. A paw, a claw, or a hoof would have pushed the sighting toward an animal explanation. Then Bill saw its face, or at least what passed for one. There didn't appear to be a clear mouth. There was no obvious nose and no visible ears that he could recognize. The face seemed almost unfinished, dominated by two large eyes that reflected the headlights with an orange glow. The eyes weren't necessarily glowing, but they definitely seemed to have reflected the light in a way that an animal's eyes can at night. But paired with the creature's strange shape and blank face, that reflection made the sighting unforgettable. The skin was later described as pale or peach-colored, with a rough texture that reminded him of sandpaper or shark skin. The sighting lasted only seconds. Bill was driving, the car was moving, and the creature was at the side of the road, but a few seconds can be enough when the image is disturbing enough. In those moments, he saw something crouched against the wall, something with a huge head, thin body, long fingers, and the rest. Then the car passed, and the creature was behind him. Inside the car, the world suddenly split in two. For Bill, something impossible had just appeared in the headlights. For his friends, nothing had happened, because they hadn't seen it. They had missed the moment, maybe because they were looking somewhere else, or talking, or simply not focusing on the roadside at the exact second the car passed. That detail makes the first sighting feel even more isolating. It is one thing to see something frightening with other people and have them confirm it. It's another to turn to the people beside you and realize that you're alone with what you saw. Then Bill had to wrestle with himself. Did he really see what he saw? Was it some animal caught in a strange position? Had the headlights distorted the shape? Had his mind filled in details that weren't there? And those are all reasonable questions, but they don't erase the force of the experience. He was shaken enough that he turned the car around and he went back. It's one of the most important parts of this first sighting because it shows that Bill did not simply laugh it off or let the moment pass. He wanted to see the thing again. He wanted some kind of confirmation. If it was an animal, maybe it was still there. If it was a trick of the light, maybe returning to the same spot would make the explanation obvious. But when the car returned, the stone wall was empty. The creature was gone, and the dark roadside looked normal again. Whatever Bill had seen had vanished into the surrounding darkness, leaving no simple explanation behind. When he got home, Bill drew it, and that sketch has become one of the most famous pieces of the Dover Demon case, showing the creature in all of its infamous glory. The drawing looked less like a known animal and more like something caught between categories. It had the posture of something upright, the head of something almost alien, and the hands of something disturbingly close to a human. Bill also reportedly insisted that he had seen the creature, and people who have written about the case more than often note that he didn't appear to be treating the incident as a joke. If that had been the only sighting, the Dover Demon might never have become famous. One teenager seeing something strange at night is unsettling, but it's not enough to build a lasting mystery. It could have been an animal, a trick of the headlights, or a moment of misperception. Most people would have missed it, and over time the story might have survived only as a strange memory told amongst friends. But the night wasn't over. A few hours later, another teenager in Dover saw something strange. His name was John Baxter. He was 15 years old, and around midnight, he was walking home from his girlfriend's house near Miller Road. His encounter is in some ways more unnerving than Bill Bartlett's because John was not protected by a moving car. He was not sealed behind glass with an engine carrying him away. He was on foot, walking alone at night through a quiet area where the darkness around him would have felt much closer. At first, John noticed a figure ahead of him. From the distance, it seemed like it could have been another person. This is another believable detail because, again, his first reaction was not to assume that he was seeing a monster. He thought he might be seeing someone else walking nearby. Maybe it was another kid. Maybe someone from the neighborhood. Then the shape turned odd. Perhaps, but still within the range of something that his mind could explain. He called out to it. If it was a person, calling out should have produced some kind of response. A turn of the head, a word or a gesture, some sign that the figure belonged to the ordinary world. But there was no answer. John continued walking, and as he got closer, the figure became harder to explain. Its proportions seemed wrong. The head looked too large for the body. The limbs once again appeared thin and awkward. The shape didn't move or stand quite the way a person should. The closer he got, the less human it seemed, until the explanation he had started with no longer worked. That slow shift is what makes John Baxter's sighting so frightening. Bill's encounter was sudden, a shocking image in the headlights. John's was gradual. He had time to approach, time to call out, and time to realize that something ahead of him was not what he thought it was. There is a particular kind of fear in that kind of recognition. Then the figure moved. It reportedly ran off towards a wooded area, into a gully or slope near the road. John followed far enough to see it near a tree, where it appeared to brace itself or cling to the trunk. Again, the detail of long fingers appears in this account. Bill had seen fingers gripping stone. John saw something with long fingers near a tree. The repetition of that detail is one reason the case became so compelling to people who later studied it. There was no attack. The creature didn't chase John or try to harm him. It seemed to flee or move away. The creature seemed almost evasive. John's encounter added a second point to the story. Now there were two separate sightings on the same night in the same town, both involving young witnesses, and both describing a small figure with a large head, thin limbs, and strange hands or fingers. The sightings weren't identical, and they didn't need to be. In fact, if they had been, they might have sounded rehearsed. Instead, they overlapped in the broad details while remaining different in the specific circumstances, which is often how genuine witness accounts tend to behave. The next day, the story began to take shape. A strange creature had been seen in Dover. At least 2 teenagers were talking about it. There were sketches and descriptions. There was also confusion. In a small town, that kind of story would not stay contained for long, especially when the witnesses were young and the creature sounded unlike anything people expected to find in Massachusetts. But even after 2 sightings, the case might still have faded, but then came a third. The following night, April 22nd, 15-year-old Abby Brabham was riding in the car with her boyfriend near Springdale Avenue. Once again, the setting was a quiet road at night, and once again this sighting happened from a car. The creature Abby saw appeared low to the ground, and at first she tried to compare it to something known. Some accounts say it struck her as monkey-like, which is a strange comparison in and of itself. Of course, there are no monkeys native to Dover, Massachusetts, and the idea of a monkey moving along a dark roadside would already be bizarre. But the comparison seems to have been less about literal identification and more about posture or body shape. The creature was described as hairless or nearly hairless, with a thin body and large head. It had no obvious tail, and like the earlier sightings, the eyes stood out, though Abby described them differently from Bill. Where Bill's creature had orange reflecting eyes, Abby described them as greenish. That difference has often been used by skeptics to argue that the accounts may not describe the same thing, but differences in perceived eye color can happen depending on lighting, angle, distance, and the witness's position. Headlight reflection is not always consistent, and fear does not make memory any clearer. What matters most is that Abby became the third young witness in roughly 26 hours to describe a strange, hairless, pale creature with an oversized head and unsettling proportions in Dover. By that point, the case had a pattern. The sightings occurred in a tight time frame. They happened in the same general area, and they involved a creature that didn't look like a normal animal. And then, after Abby's report, the pattern ended. The ending is one of the most important parts of the Dover Demon mystery. The creature didn't become a reoccurring local menace. It didn't keep appearing every April, and it didn't launch a wave of copycat sightings that stretched across years. There are monster stories where the legend grows because more and more people claim to see the thing after hearing about it. But the Dover Demon is almost the opposite. It became famous because the window was so narrow. That narrowness gives the case a strange kind of power. It feels contained, like something specific happened and then stopped. A legend with endless sightings can become messy. People add details, stories contradict each other, and hoaxes multiply. The original case gets buried under later claims, but the Dover Demon remains focused on a few key moments. Farm Street, Miller Hill Road, Springdale Avenue, April 21st and 22nd of 1977. 3 teenagers, one strange creature, or at least one strange idea that the witnesses seemed to be circling around. Of course, not everyone believed the witnesses had seen something unknown. People often tried to debunk the teens with a variety of explanations, from strange nighttime sightings to overactive imaginations to misidentification. People see animals under poor lighting all the time and interpret them incorrectly. None of the animal explanations are impossible, but the description of the creature doesn't fit any of them perfectly either. Of course, among these prevailing is the hoax theory, which of course is another possibility. The witnesses were teenagers, and the sightings happened during school vacation week. That naturally made some adults suspicious. Teenagers can make things up, and a town with quiet roads and dark woods can be the perfect place for a scary story to spread. But the hoax theory also leaves questions. The witnesses weren't all in one group. The sightings occurred in different places and under different circumstances. There was also no costume or prop ever produced or discovered. The Dover Demon doesn't behave like another monster out of a different legend. There's no dramatic attack or blood or a missing person or anything of the sort. That doesn't necessarily mean that what the kids saw was true, but it doesn't automatically discredit that either. Some people have also connected the Dover Demon's imagery to something alien because of the large head and thin body and strange eyes, and that comparison is easy to understand. The sightings also happened in the 1970s, and this was a time when UFO stories and alien encounters were becoming deeply embedded in American pop culture. But the Dover Demon doesn't really seem to fit in here either, because it doesn't contain the usual elements of a UFO encounter. In my opinion, it's more than likely some kind of animal that the children misinterpreted. Now, the fact that they all three in different instances described something similar definitely gives more credence to that they could have seen something strange or the same animal, right? However, there's no real way that we'll actually really know what took place that night. If the kids were in cahoots and made it up, or they saw some kind of deformed animal, or they really saw what people could consider to be a cryptid or an alien of some sort. So really, at this point, the legend kind of becomes subjective if one is to believe that something unknown was truly seen that night. This is why this story still has power nearly half a century later. It doesn't really need anything like a haunted house or a curse to be involved or any of the other supernatural or paranormal elements. Its description honestly is enough. These days, the roads where it was seen are quiet. Stone walls are empty. The trees don't move much. But if you drive through Dover late at night, when the houses are dark and the headlights reach ahead of you into the bends of the road, it's not hard to understand why the story survived. Because all it takes is one shape where no shape should be, one pale figure crouched low beside the stones, one pair of eyes reflecting back at you, and one terrible second where your mind tries to call it an animal, but something deeper knows that answer may not be enough. Thank you guys so much for watching this latest video. I had a bunch of people want to hear some cryptid stories, so I thought that this might be a good one to just throw in the mix. So if you liked the video, please hit the like button, subscribe if you're new here, and share down in the comments what your thoughts are. With that being said, you guys can check out my store at mysteryarchives.store for merchandise and books, or my Patreon at tier 2 or higher has all my content ad-free. And down in the comments as well, let me know some other cases that you would like me to cover and check out. Other than that, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. This has been Cody here at Mystery Archives. Make sure to stay safe out there and take care.